various of the traditions in Buddhism, and we've now moved on to what we call the third main phase of Buddhism, which is the Vajrayana. So that's up here. The Vajrayana, the diamond way, or the way of the diamond thunderbolt. And Vedanta describes how this movement emerged as a response to the Mahayana, which was the previous Buddhist movement, which had got a bit kind of conceptual and complicated. And the Vajrayana was trying to come in with something a bit more down to earth and direct, and didn't like to communicate so much in words and concepts, but more through symbols and images and myths. And a key part of the Vajrayana word is this word Vajra. And the Vajra is the diamond thunderbolt. So it's traditionally a weapon which cuts through anything that gets in our way. So in the spiritual life, it's the weapon that cuts through everything that is an obstacle to our spiritual progression and growth. So this Vajra can only really be wielded by a very powerful being. And this week we're going to learn about one of the powerful beings that wielded the Vajra. And his name is Padmasambhava. He is the Vajra Guru. So we're going to learn, Vedanta introduced him a little bit last week, but we're going to learn a bit more about Padmasambhava. He's the Vajra Guru, which means the guru who embodies reality itself. And I want to do that by looking at one of the stories from a mythical biography written about him called The Life and Liberation of Padmasambhava. There's quite a mad text. There's lots of kind of strange and wonderful things happen in that text. And it is true that in the Vajrayana there aren't loads of texts in the same way that you get in the other traditions. But what you do often get actually is biographies. You get biographies of the important figures, often written by their disciples, explaining to everyone how wonderful they are and all of their amazing qualities. So this is one of those biographies. And it's full of symbols and myth, and it's wanting to communicate the truth about reality, however shocking, however it needs to do that to communicate, that's what it will do. So the story starts in Tibet, in about 8th century Common Era. So Buddhism had once flourished in Tibet, but it had broken down, and most people were practicing a sort of shamanic, magical way. And not magical in the way that Vedanta was talking about last week either, in the lovely positive magical way. Oh no, much more dark and superstitious sort of a way, that sort of way. And that's what was going on. But then in the 8th century, a man called Trison Detsen became the king. He took the throne. And from a very young age, he'd been interested in the Dharma himself. And so quite quickly, he decided he wanted to make Buddhism into the state religion. He wanted Tibet to be a Buddhist country. So what he did is he sent some people to India, which is where Buddhism was really thriving at that time, to bring somebody back to help them. And they travelled to what's modern-day Bihar in India, to a place called Nalanda. So Nalanda was this massive university, like a city really, a small city, full of Buddhists, all living in like a monastic setting. And that was like the hub of Buddhism at that time. And they took the abbot of there, a guy called Shantarakshita, and asked him if he would please come back to Tibet and establish Buddhism into Tibet. And Shantarakshita was delighted, and he said, of course. And so he travelled all the way back to Tibet. And he had a chat with the king, and the king said, I want to build a monastery. That's what I want to do. I want to build this monastery to establish Buddhism here. So Shantarakshita sets about trying to establish this monastery, gets some people involved, and they labour all day to move the foundation, to start to build the foundations of this monastery. You can imagine them taking all the stones and the bricks and starting to create this lovely foundation for a monastery. But then something very strange happened. So the people would work in the day and then they'd go to bed. And in the morning, they would come back to carry on their work. But strangely enough, all of the work that they'd done had been undone. So all of the stones had been carried back to their normal places, and all the dirt and the cement and all of the whatever it was they were using, it was all back to, it's as if nothing had ever happened. And this was a bit of a mystery. And Shantarakshita went to talk to the king about this. And he said, look, I can't do anything about this. The problem is that there's things going on. So what was really going on was there was a Naga. So a Naga Nagas are mythical creatures, so they appear quite a lot in Buddhist literature. And they're like dragons or monsters of the depths, and they traditionally guard very valuable treasures. So this Naga lived in a rose bush at the site of where the monastery was going to be built. And the Naga realised that if the monastery was built, his rose bush where he lived, his beautiful rose bush with beautiful petals, would be ripped up to make way for the monastery. And he was not happy about that. So what he did is he called in his mates. He called in all the spirits and the demons of Tibet to help him to fight against this monastery that was going to rip up his rose bush. So it was the demons and the spirits that came in the night to take apart all the work that the humans were doing in the day. So Shantarakshita said, I'm a man of peace. So Shantarakshita literally means he who is protected by peace. So he said, I'm a gentle, peaceful man. I can't really do anything about these demons, actually. But I know a man who can. And that man is this wonderful, enlightened man who lives in India, and his name is Padmasambhava. And he is a victor over the demons. And you should get him here, he'll sort them out. And so Padmasambhava was invited to Tibet, and he eventually came to Tibet. And as he moved through Tibet, he came face to face with all the demons of Tibet, one by one. And he conquered all the demons he came across. Not by killing them, like you might expect. That's what goes on in Christian mythology, where we slay the demons, we slay the dragons. He didn't slay any of the demons, but he tamed them. He showed his power, and he got them on side, and he got them working for him. So what was happening then was, in the daytime, the humans would build the monastery, and then they'd go to bed. And then in the night, the demons all came along and they carried on the work. So the monastery was built twice as quickly as it would have been if it was just by humans alone. So that's a little part of this very mythical, and you can see what I mean when I say that it's mythical, biography of Padmasambhava. So it does seem to actually be the case that Buddhism was established in 8th century Tibet by a figure called Shantarakshita and Padmasambhava and King Trison Detsen. That seems to be literally true, but the rest of it I wouldn't recommend taking literally, probably won't be that helpful to us. But it doesn't mean we should discount it. It's really helpful when we come across things like that to think, well, what does this mean for us? So what does this story tell us about the Vajrayana? What truths does it have to reveal to us? So I want to start by going back to the Naga in the rose bush. So I said that these Nagas, they're mythical creatures that live in the depth, and they protect what's most important and valuable. And traditionally, they protect treasures. So if you remember back to the Mahayana, that it was the Nagas that protected the Dharma deep, deep down in the ocean from being got at the wrong time, and made sure that the Dharma was revealed at the correct time. So the Nagas were trusted with the Dharma, which is the most valuable treasure of all. And so for us, we can think of our Nagas as the deepest parts of ourselves, those passions and drives that move us, that fuel us all day, our deepest energies. Yeah, what's most important and precious for us. So that's really what our Nagas are, what's deepest for us. And then you get the Naga, and he calls out to the demons for help. So we could think of demons as Maras. So I've written that here as Mara. So you might have come across this word Mara. So Mara is a figure, a very traditional Buddhist figure. He appears in the Pali Canon, and I think in the Mahayana, but certainly in the Pali Canon. And he's a figure that represents all the parts of ourselves that don't want to wake up, that don't want to get enlightened, and that want to hold us back, trip ourselves up, and undermine all of our best intentions. And so, so we'll all probably recognise that we've got these parts of ourselves that want to trip ourselves up and get in our own way. So this Tibet, you're getting a sense of Tibet at this time as a land driven by deep and primal forces which are undermining a more civilised approach to life, which is what the king wanted to do. He wanted to make this civilised monastery. Thank you very much. But they weren't having any of it. And so maybe we recognise that image of Tibet as an image for what we're like. And I think a lot of us are like Tibet at that time. And we've probably all had this experience. So we've had an idea about something we'd like to do. So we've had this inspiring day. We think, oh yeah, meditating's brilliant. I know, I'm going to meditate. Every day I'm going to leap out of bed and I'm going to meditate every day. Definitely going to do that. Or perhaps we've been having a really difficult time with somebody and we think, no, meta's very important. So the next time I see that person, I'm going to move towards them. It doesn't matter how I feel, I'm going to just move towards them and say something nice. I might make them a cup of tea. So we make these aspirations for ourselves. But then, rather mysteriously, the next morning comes around, and or the next time we see that person. So the next morning comes around, and we think, oh, I'll get up and meditate. But then we hear this little voice. This little voice says, oh, I don't really need to get up and meditate. I mean, what difference will it make if I miss one day of meditation? Really, what difference will it make? So that's Amara. Or we might think, oh, it's Sunday. I can have a day off. Day off meditating, it's Sunday. Or the next time we see that person that we wanted to move towards, we think, oh, well, actually, they're looking at me a bit funny. So maybe it's up to them to come towards me. Maybe I don't need to move towards them this time. It's up to them. So these are little voices of Mara. And the thing about Mara is he's just so convincing. He's just so convincing and they're very, very appealing. Like everything he says is sort of easy. It's much easier than doing the thing that we think we want to do, really. So my example of this is watching things on Netflix. So those of you who are familiar with Netflix will know that you have to exercise some willpower in order to stop watching because they just automatically go on to the next episode. So you actually have to step in to do something about it. Otherwise, you're just carried away on this tide of series that go on for hours and hours and hours. So I'll sit there and I'll think, right, okay, I know that it's not good for me to watch more than one episode of this. It'll give me a headache. I'll kind of get a bit, and I'll lose my will to live. But it gets to the end of the programme, and then this little voice is like, oh, well, it won't hurt to watch one more. I mean, it's just another 45 minutes. I mean, what were you going to do in 45 minutes anyway? I think, oh, great. And then I just let it carry on, as if I'd never made that previous aspiration, as if it had never happened. So, yeah, I'm sure you all have your own examples of that. You'll all recognise things like that. So just like the king of Tibet had this wonderful idea of establishing the Dharma in Tibet. But when everyone was asleep, so it's just like us, we have this great idea of establishing the Dharma in our lives, like a kingdom of the Dharma, but then we go to sleep, we become less aware for a moment, for a little while, and all of a sudden, all our forces are rebelling and taking us in completely the opposite direction. In other words, we are unintegrated. We are not integrated beings. So parts of us pull in different directions. Some of us wants to go that way, some of us wants to go that way. We are not integrated. And that stops us from making progress because we're constantly pulling in different directions. So that's the situation that we're in, which is, for me, sometimes feels a little bit like anarchy. So what do we do about this? What do we do? So I want to show you a picture of Shantarakshita. So this is Shantarakshita. So this is the lovely man that they brought from India, from the monastery. He was the abbot of this lovely monastery. So you can see he looks very, he's the man of, he looks very peaceful. He's sitting kind of relaxed, in a relaxed way, nice smile on his face. He looks every inch the man of peace. Yes. So he can't do anything about this. He can't sort these deep energies out. So we're dealing with energy sent, the Maras sent by our Nagas. So these are often the deepest and rawest, coarsest energies in our being that we're trying to deal with here. So we're going to need more than just lovely peace and gentleness to deal with these Maras, these currents of our being. we're going to need Vajra energy. So I forgot to show you this Vajra. So I'll just show you, this is a Vajra. So we're going to need the energy of the diamond thunderbolt to meet these energies. So we're going to need to, that magic that Vedani was talking about last night, the magic that means that we're harnessing all the parts of ourselves, all the energies, to make magical, wonderful things happen, to help free ourselves. So we're going to need the energy of the Vajra Guru. We're going to need the energy of the archetypal Vajra bearer, the magician of the Vajrayana. And he looks like that. So it's a bit different. So we're getting rid of the lovely peaceful man and we're bringing in somebody who looks a bit frightening, a bit challenging, a bit scary even. So I'm just going to say a bit about the image of Padmasambhava, not too much, but just for anyone who's not come across Padmasambhava, that will be important. But in case you have heard of Padmasambhava before and you're going to switch off at this point, don't do that, because Padmasambhava is such a rich figure that we could all do with going over the figure of Padmasambhava again and again and again and again, because there's so much in this figure. So Padmasambhava literally means born of a lotus, lotus born, and in the mythical story he is born of a lotus. And he sits on a lotus. So there's one image. This is a slightly more traditional image. So he sits on this beautiful red lotus. And he sits in the position of royal ease. So one of his legs is hanging down. And he's not in meditation. He's looking at us. He's looking straight at us, very direct gaze. And he is smiling, but he's also frowning. And it's called his wrathful smile, his wrathful smile. He has this beautiful blue-black flowing hair. And he's dressed in these beautiful silks. So he's not got beggar's robes on. He's got these beautiful princely robes. 3 robes, in fact. So on the outside, you've got the red robe, which represents the love and compassion of the Mahayana, which was the last school that we looked at. And then underneath the red robes are some yellow robes, the robes of the Theravadan tradition, or the Hinayana, the lesser vehicle, which is the more traditional teachings of the Pali Canon. And then right at the bottom, underneath all of them, you can't see he's got the blue robe, and that's the blue robe of the secret way of the Vajrayana, close to his heart. And in the crook of his left arm, yes, there is, he holds a staff, the Katvanga, the magical staff. And on the staff, there's all sorts of strange things. Lots of 3 skulls, severed heads. And in his left hand, he's holding a skull cup. So an actual skull cup, a cup made of an actual skull, with some liquid, which is the bliss of liberation, which actually looks quite a lot like blood. And in his right hand, he holds the Vajra, the weapon of the Vajra, in the demon subduing mudra. That. The mudra, the hand gesture that subdues all of the demons and enemies of the Dharma. So he's obviously quite a different picture from Shantarajita. So we've got this magician. And I don't want to go through, oh, this means this, and that means that, and that means that, because I think that detracts from the power of the image somehow. But I do want to go through the story of Padmasambhava, say a bit more about the story of Padmasambhava, and I think that will draw more of his qualities out than me just giving you a list of what his qualities actually are. And I'm going to turn it off now so that you look at me and not there. So I want to look at how he tamed the demons, because that reveals quite a lot. Okay, so firstly, I just want to highlight again this point. Am I banging a bit? Is it all right? It's okay. Just want to highlight this point that he doesn't kill the demons. He doesn't kill the demons. And we might be surprised by this. We might think that the best thing to do with all the parts of ourselves that pull in inconvenient and unattractive directions should be got rid of. And the parts of ourselves that we think are a bit unpalatable, parts of ourselves that we're embarrassed about or ashamed of, that we should just get rid of them and push them away. In a way, that seems to be the most obvious response, doesn't it? Yeah, let's just get rid of those bits of ourselves. They're not proper Buddhist bits. So when we get jealous, when we get angry, when we get, a bit needy, all those things that happen to us. Really tempting, isn't it, just to think, oh, I'm just going to pretend that's not going on and I'm just going to ignore it because it's not a proper Buddhist thing. But that is like killing the demons. That is like killing the demons. And if we kill our demons in that way, if we just push them away, we kill all the energy in those emotions too. And that kills our energy, that kills our ability to feel alive. So I have many examples of this, but one example of this, a strong Mara for me, is that I have quite a strong fear of madness, And that sometimes comes up for me, and I find that incredibly humiliating. I have an idea that I should have got rid of that one a long time ago. I should have worked through that. That's not a proper thing to feel scared about being mad. That's not a proper Buddhist thing. So when that comes up for me, there's a strong temptation and a long-standing habit of just ignoring it and pushing it away. I think, that shouldn't be going on. I'm going to ignore that. But I've noticed over time, as I do this again and again, that when I do this, when I push it away, that gradually over time I become more and more emotionally blocked. So I become unable to experience any emotions at all, even joy and happiness. There's just less and less emotion going on, positive or negative. And actually what starts to happen is I just gradually feel a bit more dead and a bit less alive. And a bit more tired. I lose all my energy, I become tired and a bit miserable and grumpy. So that can go on for a while, and then eventually I'll realise what I'm doing, and I'll think, I'm doing that again. So then I give myself the space to actually turn towards the fear, and I really experience the fear of going mad. Really, really experience all of those, all that fear, and what that feels like in my body. And although that's really embarrassing and humiliating, also it's exhilarating. I can just feel myself coming back to life when I reconnect with part of myself where lots of my energies are tied up. So I really feel myself coming back to life. So you might have your own experiences of doing that, of cutting off energies which are contained within negative emotions. So unless we want to cut ourselves off from those energies that allow us to operate in the world, killing our demons isn't an option, actually, not in the Dharma life. We need to tame them like Padmasambhava did. So how did he do that? So, which pockets everything in? So if you look at that figure, especially that one actually, he's not a warrior. He's not holding a club or a sword or anything where he's going to slay them or fight them or in a kind of traditional kind of warring sort of a way. He is a magician. He is going to use magic to tame the demons. So I want to explore how we can use this magic of Padmasambhava to tame our demons. So I want to read you a very, very short couple of paragraphs, just so you get the flavour of the actual book that this is coming from. 2 instances of when Padmasambhava comes into contact with the demons and how he tames them. So then, in the autumn, Padma came to the castle of Mang Yul. A fury in the region of Zhang Sung, Jamun, the eminent enemy, thought she could crush the guru between 2 stone mountains. But he rose up in the sky, and the humiliated fury offered the heart of her life. As her secret name, she was called Debt of Turquoises and Diamonds, and the guru gave her a great treasure to watch over. Then, on the plateau of the sky, he reached the black castle. The white darkening of the glaciers thought a thunderbolt would destroy him, but the guru, surrounding her with one finger, swept her away into a lake. The terrified Darkini fled as far as the lake of Palmo Pantang, and then she gave the heart of her life while he bound her by an oath. As her secret name, she was called the unfleshed turquoise and diamond lamp, and he committed a great treasure to her care. So that's just a couple of examples of what he does with the demons. So he does different things with the different demons, but there's 3 things that he does in both of those examples. So I want to just go through those and explore what they might mean for us. So the first thing he does, I love this moment of suspense. It's a long moment. is he demonstrates his power. He demonstrates his power to the demons, shows his force in various magical ways. So just like this, sometimes we need to demonstrate great force. We need to make a show of our power against some of our most stubborn demons. And we need to show those demons who's boss. So I'm definitely not saying that this is always the correct attitude. So sometimes there'll be parts of ourselves that we'll be working with in more gentle and gradual ways, and that's very appropriate. But it's not always appropriate. Sometimes there might be parts of ourselves, patterns that we're in, which are very stubborn, which where a gentle and quiet approach just won't cut the mustard, just won't do it. And something more is needed. So an example of my own is that I can experience a very long-standing demon of wanting to be unkind to myself in words and deeds when I'm suffering. So I'll be having dukkha and unsatisfactoriness in my life, and I'll get into some horrible stories about myself as a response to that. It's a very, very long pattern that I've had. It's a very strong Mara for me, a very tempting Mara, very comfortable story that I fall into again and again. And if I bring a soft and gentle response to that, it's not enough. I just fall into it again and again. So as Shantarakshita says, if gentleness will not prevail, we must avail ourselves of force. And so in these situations, I need Padmasambhava's Vajric energy to stop myself falling into that old pattern, that old rut of unkindness. I need the energy that says, no, I will not do that again. That strong energy that meets the demon head on, stops me from falling down those old familiar ruts that are unkind and unhelpful, and it's not gentle. And I was trying to think of an analogy of this, and it reminded me of recently when I went shopping, and I had a trolley that would not go straight. It kept going to the left, and I know we've all had this experience because there are lots of them. And it was so difficult to keep it going down the aisles in a straight line. And it was constant effort of yanking it back and a constant application of force. If I'd have tried to guide that trolley with a gentle energy, I would have ended up in the beans. So it was very important to keep an applied force and energy to that trolley. And that is the image that I came up with when I was trying to think of this. It's a bit of a comical image, but I think it gives a bit of the flavour of it. So this is, for me, the aspect of Padmasambhava, which is holding the Vajra, the weapon, in the demon-subduing mudra. So putting down our demons, meeting our demons with the force of Vajric energy that says no and cuts through those obstacles. And this is not the same as pushing them away or killing them. That's really important. We are fully experiencing whatever's going on. We're not trying to deny our experience. But the no is a no to getting behind it, to believing it, and to putting our energy into that Mara, and to doing something different. So at this point, you might be thinking, hang on a minute, all this, what about metta? What about self-metta? You know, this all sounds great and everything, but it all sounds also a bit harsh and a bit violent. You might be thinking that. So it's really important to say that although Padmasambhava is quite a fierce character, he is the guru of blazing loving kindness. He is compassion embodied. This is the compassion of a being who loves us enough to help us to say no, loves us enough to help us do what's needed, to help us to not suffer, to change and to grow. So if we were to do this, if we were to respond to our demons in this way, it would not be from a motivation of harshness. It would be from a motivation of love and compassion and a desire for growth and for the well-being of others, you know, for ourselves and others, not being different. So it might not seem very nice, but it is kind, and I think there's a difference between being nice and being kind. Padmasambhava is not nice, but he's certainly very, very kind. And I sometimes think that nice is the enemy of kind. And that's why I love his wrathful smile so much. So yeah, it's the smile of somebody who completely loves me enough to challenge me to do what's needed to grow. Because and what's needed often isn't the most comfortable option. But real self-metta isn't about taking the comfortable option. It's not about treats, and it's not about feeling nice all the time. It's about knowing what gives us meaning in our lives, what's for benefit, and then doing that and living by that. And his Vajric energy gives us the courage and the strength and the energy to do that, to break out of our habits, and that is magic. That is magical. Great. So the second thing he does is, you might have noticed that he gave them a secret name. So the two examples that I like best are Debt of Turquoises and Diamonds and Majra Vajra of Great Power. So these names appear once the demons are tamed. And it seems as though knowing the name of these demons gives him power over them. And this is quite common in myth. So some of you might be familiar with the Earthsea trilogy by Ursula Le Guin. It's quite a famous mythical trilogy. In there, you have to be very, very careful who you give your real name to, because that automatically gives them power over you. So they won't usually use their real name just in case. And she writes, "For magic consists in this, the true naming of a thing." Magic consists in this, the true naming of a thing. So I think the same is true for our demons as well. So in a way, you could say it doesn't matter what stories our minds come up with. They could say this or that or the other, everything that's designed to trip us up and get us in trouble. The problem is when we believe those stories, the stories themselves, if we don't believe them, it doesn't matter. When we give them weight and we do what they say, that's the problem. So, for example, I really love giving talks. I really love leading study. I love communicating the Dharma. That's really important for me. But whenever I am preparing for anything to do with that, I always hear a little voice at some point that goes, "Oh, come on, really? Does anyone really want to hear what you've got to say about that? Do you really know what you're talking about?" That sort of Mara will pop up into my mind at some point. And that is the Mara of doubt. The Mara of doubt, very, very common Mara. And even the Buddha, just before he was enlightened, was visited by this Mara. And Mara said to him, "Who do you think you are, sitting on the seat of enlightenment, the Vajrasana, petty princeling that you are? Who do you think you are, about to get in all enlightened, you know?" And so that was the Mara of doubt visiting the soon-to-be Buddha. But thankfully, luckily for all of us, the Buddha didn't believe Mara. He didn't pay him the slightest bit of notice. He carried on sitting there, and quite soon after that, he became enlightened. He achieved his goal. He didn't think, "Oh yes, of course, what's so silly of me, and just get up and go back to the palaces." He didn't do that. He carried on. And so he chose to disregard Mara and continue. And I have that choice too, so when I hear that Mara, I can just call it. "Oh yeah, you're that Mara, you always pop up when I'm doing this. I'm just going to ignore you, thanks though." So I can just ignore that Mara and get on with what I'm doing. And just like that, so being able to label a Mara, "Oh, that's just doubt," gives me power over it. It gives me distance from it. I don't have to believe it. It's not true. It's just a story that's getting in my way, so I can ignore it. And we all have that same choice. So any stories that come into our minds, any Maras that are really unhelpful, all they're going to do is cause us difficulty. We have that same choice to disregard them and to leave them behind, to not let them have power over us. And in the Pali Canon, the Buddha is visited by Mara again and again, and each time the Buddha just responds, "I see you, Mara," and the Mara has no power. So if we have that awareness to notice when our Maras are arising, we can just name them, and then they have no power over us, and we are not stopped by them. So we need courage and determination to do this, and also awareness, to learn the secret names of our Maras, our demons, and to reveal them so they don't have power over us. So the next time we catch ourselves thinking, "Oh, I can't do this, it's too difficult, I'm not good enough, they don't like me," or any of those other really unhelpful stories that we get into, we could just choose to name them as Mara and drop them. And it's important to do this kindly and not harshly, and with a sense of humour. Often Mara is a bit ridiculous, and he's often portrayed like that, as a bit ridiculous. And our spiritual friends can really help us here. They can really help us to see our maras. They can help us to name these stories as stories and not true. And they can also help us to do that kindly. And they can also remind us and point out the consequence of believing in that mara and letting ourselves be blocked by that story about ourselves. So thirdly, he's showed them his boss. The secret name has been revealed, and finally, he gives them a treasure to watch over, which I really like. So I said traditionally that Nagas, they guard the treasures, they guard what's most valuable and precious. And so they've already got treasure, but Padmasambhava gives them even more. They've all got even more treasure. So I was thinking, what does that mean for us? So what is for us what's most valuable? What for us is what's most important, most worth protecting and guarding? And I was thinking that that is whatever most truly allows us to develop and grow. Often our maras will point us towards looking for a solution to our unhappiness in sources and places that will never deliver that happiness, places that can never deliver that happiness, rather than places that will, places that help us feel love and connection and a deeper understanding of reality and a kinder and less selfish attitude. So there where we'll really find kindness, but that's not what Mara tells us. And the Dharma, which is the ultimate treasure, the ultimate medicine for the sufferings of the world. So I was reflecting what stops us doing what we really need. And for me, at least, one of the things that can really get in the way of this, of doing what we really need, is doing what we think we should need, what we think we should do, what Buddhism should be like. And it made me think of the Naga in the rose bush. So the Naga is living in this beautiful, beautiful rose bush, representing our deepest energies, our deepest drives. And, wildness, the wildness of those energies. And we could think of the monastery as being like our ideas, our constructions of what Buddhism and we ourselves should be like. So what a proper Buddhist does, what a proper Buddhist doesn't do, how we should be changing, how we shouldn't be changing, what our spiritual path should look like or what it shouldn't look like, all these things, these ideas that we impose on our Dharma lives. And if you're like me, it's probably something that's a bit neat and tidy. It's quite sensible, quite presentable, and usually quite convenient. That's what we think it should be like. And don't I wish it was? But it's just not like that, is it? It's just not like that. It's actually going to be a lot more of a messy and inconvenient affair than that, I'm sorry to say. And if we've got ideas about what we think it should be like, or what it's going to be like, or what we're like, or what we should be like, we're probably wrong. So we're probably best to realise that right now. So, for example, one of the things I wanted when I started to come to the Buddhist Centre is I wanted to have kind of deeper, more meaningful relationships. That's been important to me. Learn how to be in connection and to open up. And I had a bit of an idea about what that would look like. But it hasn't looked a lot like that. Actually, what it seems to look like is learning how to cry and be embarrassed in that way, feel a little bit humiliated and be vulnerable and talk about my feelings, which I haven't enjoyed very much at all, but is what I needed. It's definitely what I needed to do, and it's what's helped me grow. Has not been a convenient and civilized affair on the whole. But, but those of you who know me will probably agree it's what was needed. So it's really important, I think, to make conscious our views of what we think we or the Dharma life should look like. Because if we are holding on to views unconsciously, they might be limiting our growth. And there's a lovely image for this, which a senior order member called Subhuti talked about once. He said, it's a little bit like we build the foundations for our Dharma lives over here, is what we love and what we really care about and what we're really passionate about. And then it's like we build the edifice and all of the rest of the building sort of next door to the foundations. So it's got no proper foundations. So if our lives aren't, if we, sorry, I've slightly lost my place. So if our lives and our choices, if our Dharma lives aren't really flowing from what we're really passionate about, what we really love, what we really, really care about, really, truly and honestly, not just what we think we should, then it's a little bit like a Dharma life with no real foundation. And just like a house with no real foundation, it will crumble. It is not sustainable to live a Dharma life separated out from our deepest energies. And it will collapse, because sooner or later our deepest forces and energies, they will rebel just like that Naga. And we'll probably have to learn how to do it all again. So I had an experience of this. I learned to meditate here about 11 years ago, and I started to do that in quite a willful way. And what that means is that I had an idea about what meditation and what I wanted to get out of meditation. And what that was really was not looking at my emotions very much and just focusing on the technique. So just, getting to 10 and sort of squeezing out metta for people, not really taking into account how I actually was. That was what I thought meditation was. It's not, by the way, just in case you thought that was wrong. So I meditated like that for quite a long time, and eventually I just started to get a massive headache every time I sat down to meditate. And sadly, that still goes on to this day. So I'm still having to learn to put right the mistake I made then. I'm still having to learn a way to remove the monastery from my Naga rose bush, because it's a deeply ingrained habit now after all these years. So to live on top of our foundations, we need to know how we really are, what really drives us, what we really love, and take that into account and make that part of our foundations. And it will be different for all of us. There's not one thing that will inspire and drive everybody here in this room, definitely. And it will change for us even over time. So, for example, I really enjoy Dharma study. I get really excited about that. But then sometimes I'm more excited about meditation. So it's a case of staying in touch with what's really going on for me, not an idea about what fires me up, but what is really firing me up then, at that moment. And also, things that fire us up aren't obviously sometimes dharmic things. So for me, I get very inspired by this, by magic and mystery, that kind of myth, archetypal myth. So for me, Harry Potter, it's really important for me to keep in touch with Harry Potter and Star Trek. Like, if I'm not keeping in touch with these things, then I can feel a bit dry and a bit shriveled. So, and Subhuti makes this point, that whatever it is, even if it's football, he says, even football, I don't know why that's such a terrible thing, but even whatever it is, we need to bring it into the foundations of our Dharma building, because if we don't, it will collapse. Because we can't live the Dharma life unless it's built on the foundations of our actual energies. Good, so those are the three things. He demonstrates his power, he gives them a secret name, and he gives them a treasure to watch over. So from those 3 points, I've deduced 3 things that we might like to try in our lives, perhaps this week. How to conjure like the Vajra Guru. So how we can bring this magic and energy into our own lives this week. And there's 3 things. The first one, just say no. Just say no. So are there any niggling demons and maras that have just really got us wrapped around their little finger, that trip us up again and again? So we could try invoking the energy of the Vajra Guru and just saying, no, I will not do that again. So we could try doing that and see what happens. The second thing we could try to do is to use the magic of the true name. So we could, if there are any maras in our experience, we can use the magical properties of the Vajra Guru to help us to notice and name our stories. The stories that we tell that trip ourselves up and get in our way. And we could have the confidence, we could use this energy to help us have the confidence just to drop them and see what it would be like to live without them. Just see what would happen if we just dropped them. And we could even involve our friends in this. We could tell our maras, if we're brave, we can tell our maras to one of our spiritual friends and see what they've got to, if they can help us with that. And finally, we can build on solid foundations. So we could try to be especially aware of and honest about what really, really excites us at the moment. What is really getting us going just now? And be honest about that and try to examine whether or not that is really part of our Dharma life. Is that really in the foundations of what we're doing? And make sure, maybe see if we can make it even more of an integral part of that, so that we can make our Dharma life even more sustainable and alive and full of that energy, that Vajra energy. So there's a lovely happy ending to this story, of course, which is the demons are tamed and the monastery is built twice as quickly because the humans are working in the day and the demons are working at night. So there's a happy outcome. So just like that, when our energies are no longer pulling in these opposite directions, so when they're pulling in these opposite directions, we're quite fragmented, really. We're quite fractured and compromised in our energies. But when they come together, when all of us is behind the same thing, then we can be stronger than we ever thought was possible. And we've got all more and more, hopefully in the Dharma life, more and more, we become more and more integrated, so that gradually more and more of us is building the monastery at different times of the day. When we're asleep, when we're awake, all the time, it's going on, all in one direction. We're not leaving any bits of ourselves out. And the more we get our demons on side and harness this incredible energy that is within us through this integration, the more unstoppable we become in our quest for liberation. Thank you very much.